Well, hello and welcome back. We are sharing more stories today through Build Carolina. I am Leah King. I'm the executive director of Build Carolina, and we have another very special guest with us today. I will let him introduce himself.
Hey, I'm Camby Chavis. I'm a software engineering consultant for Booz Allen Hamilton. I'm currently working with the CDC with the Next Generation Sequencing Quality Initiative team as their web developer and technical SME. Um, I'm happy to be here today.
We're
Thank you for
so
inviting
glad you're
me.
here. Yes, we're so glad you're here, Camby. That sounded very impressive already. So you're setting the bar really high. So thank you for that. But really, we're here today just to have you share a little bit about your story and kind of how you got to be in this very impressive place where you are now. So I'd love to just kind of get started at the very beginning. Will you kind of share a little bit about maybe where you're from and what your early, I guess, educational journey looked like?
Certainly. Um, I believe that I have a story that a lot of people can see themselves in. I am from a really small town. I'm from Pillion, South Carolina. You may have to look that up on a map. Um, we actually grow a lot of crops around here. We're like 90% farmland. It's fantastic. And so growing up in a small farm town, there were a lot of career opportunities that we as learners throughout school were sort of directed towards. A lot of people went into, say, healthcare or one of the nearby industries, manufacturing. I have always had a an interest and a passion for computer science. And it took me a long time to really own that. I know I was one of those kids that was sitting there staying up late playing with my computer, whether it be building a cool little program or making a game or playing a game. Um, One of those kids, your parents were, telling you to get off and focus on your studies so you can become a nurse or a lawyer or a doctor or what have you. Um, and I never really sat right with that. I started my career journey actually in EMS. I worked for 12 years up through midway through the pandemic is when I exited. Throughout that time, I had wanted to transition, but I think just being told that computer science was my hobby, I believe I was really fixated on finding something that I suppose I had ingrained in me as a more legitimate and a more achievable goal for my setting. I tried multiple times to pursue um, college degree for various subjects, and it never really clicked.
Mm-hmm.
I think, like a lot of people, when they make a drastic change, there was a seminal event for me. I had a coworker pass away on an EMS call, and that drove a series of events. And again, what it wasn't important. There was a big life change, an epiphany that showed me that I wasn't self-actualizing. And so I began to explore other career fields with a new perspective. And I really found comfort in the work I had been doing as a hobbyist programmer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I made the decision with my wife that I was going to commit to this. And being in a small rural town in South Carolina, I had yet to move away from it. It was difficult to find my tribe, so to speak. And so I, like so many others, turned to the internet. And one of the first things I found to guide my studies was the Odin Project. And I moved through that. One of the things Odin encouraged you to do was to connect with local community. And so I suppose I hadn't thought of a an online community that was present in South Carolina, but it existed and I found it. In mid 2020, I found SC Codes and I clicked with it pretty hard. Um, I went to a few events and I took all the courses, and it sort of opened me up to a local world that was sort of behind the scenes, people that I may not have the opportunity to meet normally. And I was having conversations that were full of interest, and I was studying, and it felt right. And that ultimately moved me towards my decision to apply um, to develop Carolina. And the rest is history. I'm here today because of that. So
And the rest is history. No, that, I mean, thank you for taking us through so many parts of your journey that I do agree that there are so many folks who will resonate with your story. So thanks for sharing that. I want to rewind a little bit to kind of this, I don't know, not it's not a gap because it's just part of the journey, but the part of the journey kind of post high school, and you were talking about the whether they were literal or figurative, like the voices in either in your head or just in front of you who are saying, okay, here are your options, and these are the legitimate career pathways that are available, and just not really even considering that there might be anything else. Um, and you had a couple of starts and stops with thinking about additional education. Um, if you can, kind of traveling back to that in your memory, um, like to take us back a little bit to that point when you're still very young adult, still trying to kind of find your way. You end up making this decision to go into EMS, and you maintain this bit of a hobby on the side. But did you ever really think critically about your career back then, or was it just kind of, taking the next logical step, or what did that feel like for you?
it felt like my life was on rails, so to speak. I come from a largely medical family. My father was a paramedic, my mother was a nurse. It felt very guided towards a medical career. It never felt right, but that there were a lot of forces in my life pulling me towards that industry. My family owned an EMS service at the time. As I was exiting high school and moving into college, and I would go to school during the day and work shifts in the evening. I didn't have the passion driving me then. And coming from a setting where I think a lot of people find themselves in an area where they're able to succeed because it's easy, but they truly excel in the areas that they have interest in. I found that my studies were more focused for the first time on medicine and biology, and it wasn't something that captivated me in a way that I found meaningful, but it was something that allowed me to relate to my peers, to my coworkers, to my family. It was something that brought us together, and I think that was a strong driving force. I feel like I've seen a lot of people navigate towards social junctions that supported their career choices. It was an upstream swim to make the decision to go towards computer science. Um,
So, Camby, you mentioned your wife at some point in telling your story at the beginning. And that's a pretty big life change, life moment. So, tell us about kind of how that happened and when that happened, and just that part of your story.
my wife, we went to school together for 12 years, from first to 12th grade, and we met in our senior year of high school. We were high school sweethearts. And we sort of took this journey into adulthood together. We were from very similar backgrounds, very similar households, and the bond of familiarity was really strong. I One of the things I did was I was able to encourage her to move away from an engineering program she had no passion for and move into veterinary medicine. That wasn't me telling her what to do. She had wanted to do that. She just needed someone beside her to say, it's all right to do this. And I think I was a little naive because I was able to give that, but I wasn't able to hear it.
Mm,
And so it took me a while to, again, to find my tribe and to move into a career in computer science. But she has been a constant in my life. We have been married for going on 6 years together. Oh, geez, 13 now. My age is showing. We have two children together. And she has been there beside me when I was at my lowest. She helped facilitate my career change. To prepare, what I had done is pull a ton of overtime working, and we were able to buy a very low cost house. And we decided that we were going to make a significant change. We were going to use this period to rebuild ourselves because it was something that meant a lot to us. And so I worked odd jobs after I made an exit from EMS mid
mhm.
2020 just to make ends meet while she was the primary breadwinner, and she allowed me the freedom to study. I found a lot of voices in my life telling me I was doing the wrong thing, or I should, focus on industry more so than expansion during that period. Um, but she never wavered, and
Mm,
having that support system was huge for me. I don't think it has to be a lifelong partner, your wife next to you. I think just having someone who was telling me that what I was doing was meaningful and was worth it
yeah.
was huge.
Yeah. What a great point. And I'm glad you kind of brought that up in talking about the relationship with your wife. It's of course awesome that you have that. But that little point where you said she almost kind of gave you verbal permission that we often don't give ourselves, or we don't really. We're it's common that we're waiting for someone to give us permission to do the thing that we know we want to do or to pursue something different. It is not in our human nature to pursue change on purpose. It's much easier to just like you described it, Camby, like your life is just kind of on the rails, like right, you're just kind of going moving forward, and so that is really special to have. And I love that you kind of each pushed each other into a better situation and a better career path, knowing that that path is not linear for a whole lot of people, and then that's okay. So thanks for sharing that part. So take us to you find the Odin project, you start to kind of complete some learning there. Then you find SC codes, which really adds another layer of community, mentorship, and just people who are here, who are local that you get to know. Um, so I think that there are many people who would, at that, if they were in your shoes at that point, they would feel like they needed a very legitimate, certificate or degree or checkbox to then move into a new chapter. For you was applying to this full-time apprenticeship, Develop Carolina. Um, Tell us about kind of your decision making in that moment. And as someone who is largely self-taught, how did you feel about that at the time?
I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. So, if you roll a d12, the average outcome is 6.5. If you roll two d6s, the average outcome is 7. You've got to take those shots. There was no point in my studies where I said, I'm ready. I'm definitively a developer and engineer. I'm a qualified individual. I still find myself with days of doubt, days where I definitely feel like I haven't moved far enough, but then I see what I have done and what I'm able to do compared to where I was 2 years ago. And it, in retrospect, made those steps more meaningful. When I started out, I knew what I wanted, but I didn't know how to get there. There was no definitive path. And truthfully, it was my situation in life that limited my educational opportunities at the time. Just, having two kids, trying to make ends meet, wanting to make a significant change. We had invested largely in positioning ourselves in a better living situation so that we were able to have that bit of financial freedom. But things were still tough. This was still during the middle of the pandemic, and we didn't know where the end was. There was no roadmap, but I kept applying to positions along the way, to opportunities. I kept rolling those dice. I didn't want to roll one big die. I wanted to keep rolling the little ones. And ultimately, it paid off. Um, I want to credit luck because you can study and be the most talented developer, but if you don't put yourself out there, you're never going to have that moment where the cards align and you're in the right room with the right person. Being able to network through programs like SC Codes and the Odin Project were huge in my progression as a developer. I had friends who were then able to look at projects I was working on and advise me. I know there were days where staring at lessons wasn't in the cards for me. So I would just pick something fun and just work on it. Just do something. Just keep moving
Mm-hmm.
forward. Again, not knowing where the end was. And there was no point where I was super confident that everything was just going to be okay. It was just step after step. There was always a contingency. I still worked odd jobs to try to make things meet. And we knew that, we had a time window. Um, but I felt like I was making meaningful progress. I was able to do things every month that I wasn't able to do prior, understand things that I hadn't. And there were aha moments. Those aha moments feel fantastic. And I am in the career now and I still have daily aha moments where things just click together and it feels so good. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think that was a dopamine carrot on a stick that just kept pulling me forward too, just feeling like I was progressing. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I still had days where I didn't know what I knew, so to speak. Yeah, I suppose I could pause there.
Yeah, well, there's so much there to kind of unravel, and I do want to hear from you though. Like, so
Yes.
an apprenticeship is, and ours is a little bit unique, but it is a very specific type of work-based, it's paid work-based learning experience. So it really does provide this bridge to help get folks from the world of learning into the world of working full time. um, it is not, something that everyone pursues. It is not a perfect fit for everyone, but you found it. Probably, I'm assuming. You tell me if I'm wrong, but since you were in the SC Codes community, and this is another program that that we run, you find out about this apprenticeship and start exploring it. You apply. What happens next?
Well, you're right. It was luck that I found it because I wanted to turn towards other areas to learn. I found the Odin Project. Because I found the Odin Project, I looked for things like SC Codes. Because I found SC Codes, I got that email from Katie one day that mentioned an apprenticeship. Apprenticeship, the terminology there struck me. My grandfather was a welder and a builder. Even though he was in paramedicine, my father was a welder. It had this very hands-on spin that I realize that's what I'm doing. I am seeking to apprentice. I am wanting to study from those who have learned before me, and I want to eventually be able to pass on what I've learned. There's this tradition to it that really appealed to me. So I saw the word apprenticeship and I looked into it. Um, I misread because I actually, even after I interviewed and was accepted, was not aware that it was a paid apprenticeship. That was a huge surprise and a huge relief. But I'm so glad that I took those shots, though, that I rolled those die to get the opportunity.
Mhm.
So,
We're so glad to. And what was the experience of the apprenticeship? So it was primarily
Right.
remote, spending time in a virtual classroom with a small cohort of folks, most of whom worked at the same employer host as you, some of whom also worked at other companies. Um, what was that experience like for you?
My particular cohort was very lucky in that we were all in the same project for our
Mm-hmm.
apprenticeship. We all went through the residency at Booz Allen together. The first 3 weeks, I didn't know what to expect, but there is something inviting and disarming about one Alex Martin, and I knew just listening to him that I was in the right place. I, being from a small town, I wanted to make significant change. I made it a point during the apprenticeship to go out and meet a lot of my peers. So I have an album of photos with most of my cohort. I'm still working on reaching a few people. Not going to Maryland quite yet, um, but it felt supportive and it felt like we were all going through this journey together. It wasn't competitive. It was truly a building process in a place in an environment where not only were we surrounded by skilled expert software developers, but we had the opportunity to fail. We had the opportunity to try and build on what we knew and take risks with what we could do. I got to work closely with a few members of the cohort as we built our full stack project, and I built what are turning out to be lifelong relationships with that cohort. It was truly a life changing experience for everyone involved.
Mm.
Um,
And you had a good result,
I did,
which was a job offer.
certainly.
Congratulations. And you're still
Thank you.
there. And how long has it been?
Yes. I started, I was hired on full time last July,
Mm-hmm.
and I was transferred to the team I'm currently on in October. So I've been with my team since October. I've been with
Right.
Booz Allen in total since last February. So
Mm-hmm.
a few different milestones there.
Yeah. It's been so fun so far to follow your journey. And of course, it's not over. It's still just the beginning. But um, at this point, looking back, what do you now identify as some of your maybe biggest challenges in making a career change, in finally getting a full-time job offer? Like at this point, what were the hardest parts of that journey?
I was battling myself a lot for sure. There were times where I was wondering what learning JavaScript would do and how it directly translates over into being a software developer, where I wasn't sure if building a game in Java was going to actually net me skills that would be valuable in my career. And ultimately, they were valuable lessons that I learned along the way. Um, yes,
You battle yourself, as we all do.
we do.
Is it doubt in your own kind of innate ability, or is it something else?
There was never a clear finish line. I think that was the worst part, never knowing again if those things I was doing were going to pay off. If I didn't have a supportive cast of fellows and friends behind me, I don't know that I would have had the same result. I didn't do this alone. There was tremendous support. I chose to surround myself with people who had a similar view, who were supportive, who encouraged me to grow and learn in positive ways.
Mm,
I wouldn't have been able to do that, to overcome that uncertainty without making those choices, without making positive life changes along with it in order to grow as a person and
mhm.
move onward in my career.
Yeah. So, right now, if you were to put up kind of a parallel view of Camby in EMS and continuing in that relatively steady, fine career and a family and a home. And there's really nothing inherently wrong with that path and that life. And then comparing that in a parallel way with who you are now and where you are now and where your family is now, what the future looks like. What strikes you as kind of just the most important difference there?
Yeah, I don't think any path is wrong. I think paths can be wrong for people.
Mm,
And I saw that my coworkers when I was in EMS were deriving more, I don't want to say self-worth, but more self-actualization from progression than I was. It didn't feel right. I just had this, I knew in my gut that that wasn't where I was meant to be. Um, I think because I was able to make that journey, or maybe because I was able to change, it allowed me to make the journey. Whichever came first, there was a series of changes that coincided um, to really push me, to be the catalyst, to push me over the edge on that. And I think a lot of people are sitting in careers that they may not be as fulfilled by.
mm,
And for there's so many things we tell ourselves to garner complacency, to say this isn't the greatest, but this makes sense to me, and we're going to keep doing this.
yeah.
It's a challenge you've got to prepare for,
Mm,
but it is something that is doable. It's not always easy, but it is something that is doable and rewarding at
mm.
the end. So
I'm just so glad that you eventually trusted yourself and your gut and kind of what you knew to be true, even if it took time and other people's voices and um, that permission, that external permission, that eventually you trusted yourself. If more people would do that, like who knows what would happen. So now, Camby, I have to brag on you a little bit because you've only been in your full time role since July, and yet you waited approximately 5 minutes before you raised your hand to start giving back and mentoring and teaching and helping others. So, talk about why that's important to you.
I was surprised to find a program with as much altruism as Develop Carolina and Build Carolina. It it truly was something life-changing and positive for me that I feel a lot of people should have access to. I truly wish that the model here would move on to other industries. It doesn't have to be computer science. That was my passion, but others have passions as well that just sit unfulfilled because they're stuck and there's not that positive helping hand to move in the right direction. Um, I knew when I was partway through the program that this is something that I wanted to give back to. And I really didn't hesitate. Any way that I was able to help the program, I'm willing to do that because I wouldn't be where I am without all of that support from SC Codes and then Develop Carolina and Build Carolina. And admittedly, if I want to stay sharp, I can't forget the fundamentals. And so being able to revisit basic JavaScript courses is huge to re what's the word there? To reinforce
Yeah.
my foundation in learning so that I can speak with confidence and I can move on to other subjects in a way that is coherent and meaningful for my personal learning journey. And being able to honestly being able to see that aha moment for others is really nice as well. I've always sort of moved towards mentoring or instructing even when I was in EMS.
Mm,
It's a really good feeling. So there are a few reasons, but I was eager to jump the bit whenever there was an ask to assist. So
yeah. Well, we and all the people who have benefited from that say thank you and are just super appreciative of what you bring to the table. You have brought in to this organization and this work, much more than you've ever taken. So thank you for that. You're such a good example, and just for sharing your story, which again is still in the early stages. There's so much journey left to go, and so if there are folks out there who are watching or listening and who resonate with your story, Camby, are there ways that they can follow along? Are there places that they can find out more about you or get in touch?
Certainly, I'm always available on LinkedIn, um, Camby Chavis, my GitHub at Camby Cult, um, and show up to an SC Codes event. I'm likely to be there. That's a good way to meet me. If you want to progress and learn in computer science, there's so many avenues to learn. Just pick something you're interested in and go towards it. If what you want to do is build an app, you have an idea for it, just start there. Pick something, pick a part, start with it. Um, Things like the Odin Project and the lessons and courses that SC Codes offers, the mentorships that SC Codes offers are invaluable. And there's no right path. Just keep taking the next step. So
Mm, such wise words, Camby. Thank you so
I don't
much
know
for
about that.
sharing. Thank you for sharing, and for just giving us something to look forward to. So we appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.